Thank you so much for taking time to be here. Good evening. Welcome to the 5th Pan-African Congress 1945 and today. This is a film launch and a discussion. So my name is Syng and I'm one of the co-organizers. I am one of the co-founders of REAP, which stands for the Race Equality Activity Planning Group. And we have curated tonight's event. So we are encouraging physical distancing and mask wearing this evening. And we want to make this an inclusive space this evening, and we will not tolerate racist, ableist, homophobic, or transphobic language or ideas. So why are we here this evening? Well, I'm going to call upon Professor Steve Decent, Manchester Metropolitan University's Provost and Deputy Vice Chancellor, and a valued REAP ally, to say a few words about the context.
Thank you,
Decent.
Excellent, thank you. So it's fantastic, of course, to be in a room with real people and not sitting looking at a screen this evening with us all in two dimensions. So it's so exciting to be here tonight and actually physically here tonight. So I'm Steve Decent. I'm Deputy Vice Chancellor here at Manchester Met, and welcome and really good to see you. We've been through such a difficult time, all individually and as a university and as a city and as a world over the last 18 months. It's so nice to be together, but it's so nice to be able to talk about the sorts of things we're going to talk about this evening. If you think about the role of universities in society, we've heard a lot over the last 18 months around the role of science and medicine in terms of producing vaccines and therapeutic interventions for COVID and all of those important things. And that is important. But I think also we're reminded tonight of the importance of art and creativity in the humanities and social sciences as well as part of university life. And it's so fantastic to be here tonight to talk about the agendas that we're going to talk about. I often think that science has a really important role and technology has a really important role in universities in helping us to live longer, healthier lives. But it's really also so important that of art and humanities and the social sciences coming together, because I think those disciplines help us make those longer, healthier lives worth living. And I think we'll really see that this evening in terms of the context. It's about in terms of celebrating people and making us really think and making us really question. So I'm delighted to welcome you here to the Race Equality Action Planning Group event. So this is the first of the events which is celebrating Black History Month. So REAP, as Kai said, is a cross-institutional coalition which was founded in the wake of the Pan-African 75th anniversary celebrations last year. So co-curated by Ola and Kai, PAC 75 reached over 18 million people worldwide, with engagement and praise from BBC Radio 4, University of Ghana, NYU and many other organisations. So today it brings scholars and thinkers, students and friends from the community together to catalyse and advance conversations around anti-racism through the powerful processes of art, creativity and culture. And efforts like this bring to life the ethos of the New Civic University Agreement that the universities across Greater Manchester have recently signed, and shine a light on driving progress in the cultural and creative economies and tackling inequalities, whilst also showcasing the overlapping core values of innovation, education and skills that our university shares. So this evening is a celebration of place, it's a celebration of our ambition and our community in partnership between Salford University and Manchester Poetry Library. So I invite you to join us in celebrating race equality and allyship in Manchester and beyond this evening. And I'll pass you back on to Kai and our colleagues. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Decent. And so we are filming tonight's event, and you notice there are cameras around. And we'll be uploading this recording onto the PAC 75 YouTube channel so that we can reach maybe 19 million people this year. So no pressure, guys. If you do not wish to be filmed, please approach one of my colleagues who will give you a sticker. So yeah, let us know if you are not comfortable with being filmed. And it's really significant that we're actually physically here because we're on the vicinity of where the actual Pan-African Congress took place in 1945. Evidence is here. You can see a red plaque here, and that's just outside. I have no sense of direction. Where is that? Everyone knows that. There. So please go and have a look at that later on. So, and I want to now welcome Professor Ola Uduku, the person who's been responsible to make any of this happen at all, the Pan-African Congress celebrations last year, and this evening, and REAP, and so on. So, Professor Ola Uduku, please step forward. She's our national president. And I want to swiftly introduce the stars of tonight's event, and also to thank a few people. So just bear with me for a couple of minutes more, if that's okay. So we want to say a big thank you to Becky Swain and Martin Kratz of the Poetry Library. So Becky is the lady over there, and this is the beautiful Manchester Poetry Library that we are in today. There are loads of events coming up, so we'll be sharing some of them at the end of today's event. And I also want to say a big thank you to Ade Castronovo over there. He is the technical wizard who's making a lot of this happen. And of course, the RISE program. Tonight's event is a collaboration with the RISE program. And if you are signing up to this as part of that, you can claim points. And that's an innovative program that the university has set up, and undergraduate students can be a part of. So this is the QR code that you can take a picture of later. And I also want to thank the interns who are here to help to make this possible. So we have with all the winning ingredients of the PAC 75 and also the original Pan-African Congress with young people, emerging leaders. We've got people from all walks gathered together. So a very apt event. So, and of course, I want to say thank you to Dr. Stefanie Madawi, who's at the back over there. And she's also helped to make this evening possible. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce the people, the stars of tonight. And they are, so you can see the three of the four filmmakers who are here tonight. So we have Danny Haywood,
It's me.
Tsvetozar, Clint, Ivanov,
That's me.
Sam Wells, and Adam Douglas. And Adam Douglas can't be here tonight, but we also have Dr. Jade Munslow, and they've come all the way from the University of Salford, so let's welcome them. So without further ado, I think we're just going to get the film going, and then we'll just enjoy the film and get the discussion going. So thank you.
It's October 1945, and the city of Manchester is celebrating the end of the Second World War. But in a small town hall in Charlton, a group of politicians and activists from across the world were about to meet for an event that would change an entire continent and shape the future of the British Empire. Over the next 5 days, the attendees will discuss race relations, discrimination, and national independence movements. This was the 5th Pan-African Congress of 1945, and it helped put the continent of Africa and the Caribbean on the path to freedom. Following the Congress, Kwame Nkrumah returned to his home of the Gold Coast, determined to establish a country built on Pan-African values. Before becoming Prime Minister of what would later become Ghana after independence, Nkrumah and 5 other leading figures in the country's history would lead the people of the Gold Coast to independence from British rule. However, Nkrumah's activism against British colonial rule would face consequences. In 1950, Nkrumah and other activists would plot a general strike against the British governor of the Gold Coast, Charles Arden Clarke, resulting in his arrest. Despite this, Nkrumah continued fighting colonialism, and 1 year later, he and his party won the country's first free election from inside his jail cell. Nkrumah's victory from the confines of a prison showed the African continent that anything will be possible for their people, and that there was nothing standing in their way. But above all else, Nkrumah championed an ideology called Pan-Africanism. With its origins dating back to the original Atlantic slave trade, Pan-Africanism is a belief system that seeks to unify black people and those of African descent against oppressors and colonizers through solidarity and the belief that their culture is to be celebrated by all. Nkrumah pursued this by nationalizing Ghana's industries and spreading Pan-Africanism worldwide by visiting countries with large communities of black and immigrant populations from the continent.
For Dr. Nkrumah, this is a moment when great plans come true.
It is inconceivable that a racial minority will be able forever to maintain its totalitarian domination over an awakened majority.
He met with world leaders to promote this ideology with the hopes of unifying the continent, as well as social and economic differences in African citizens and diaspora across the globe. Nkrumah never gave up on his dream of uniting the continent and was an inspiration for many other figures who believed in the cause of Pan-Africanism. Back in Manchester, black and African immigrants were facing discrimination in both housing and education for the colour of their skin. Among them was the son of a Sierra Leonean immigrant named Len Johnson. As a child, Len developed a love of boxing, eventually becoming a professional. However, despite his abilities, he was banned from playing at the Royal Albert Hall and other official venues because of his skin colour. Although this struggle greatly affected him in his life, he persevered, winning 96 out of 135 matches in his professional career, allowing him to gain nationwide fame for his performances. After retiring from the sport in 1933, Johnson became a strong advocate for Pan-Africanism. He joined the Communist Party, and in 1945 he met Nkrumah and many other delegates at the 5th Pan-African Congress in his home city. Whilst there, he discussed discrimination in South Africa, and he firmly believed that Pan-Africanism was the key to bringing people together. Inspired to fight for change, Len started with his home city where he created the New International Club, a sporting venue that promoted non-white sports players and entertainers. This new organisation attempted to raise awareness of the anger that many black Mancunians were feeling at the time. Along with the New International Club, Johnson would run for mayor, where he would raise awareness to inequalities in housing and education based on race. Thousands of people would show up to his events, where he would help in the fight against racial discrimination and to protect workers of colour. His activism was a driving force behind the Race Relations Act of 1965, which banned a bias on the basis of skin colour in the workplace. All the way in Jamaica, an aspiring Pan-Africanist called Amy Ashwood Garvey would found the Negro World newspaper with her husband Marcus in 1914. The paper discussed stories focusing on the lives of people of colour in America and promoted art and poetry by black creators. Garvey would regularly be seen using her newspaper to promote Pan-Africanism and connect the black peoples of Jamaica to those living in North America and Europe. Despite its dissolution in 1933, the Negro World newspaper was a huge success and left a lasting impression on many people. At its peak, it boasted 200,000 sales. And like Johnson, Garvey also created an organisation to help black people suffering from discrimination. This group was known as the Universal Negro Improvement Association. In her journeys across different lands and cultures, Garvey discovered that all Africans have a shared heritage through music, art, and dance. This inspired her to use the Negro World newspaper to promote Pan-Africanism, to celebrate African life, and to unify the people following years of oppression, slavery, and cultural replacement. In 1932, Garvey moved to London where she opened the Afro Women's Centre. dedicated towards helping to develop a community among black women in the city. This location would be visited by many other Pan-Africanists in her lifetime, most notably Nkrumah, who in 1945 spoke alongside Garvey at the 5th Pan-African Congress to promote unity and equality among black and African people. In the years following the Congress, decolonization in the continent became more and more of a reality every day. And the works of people like Nkrumah, Johnson and Garvey will go on to inspire future politicians and activists that would be a positive force for Pan-Africanism and black empowerment alike. Their legacy can be seen in figures such as Marxist writer C.L.R. James, who wrote plays about slave revolts in Haiti and how it led to the first free black republic. Or James Baldwin, an openly gay civil rights activist and author who wrote about the struggles of racism that he faced in America and France. And more recently, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a politician who would later become president of Liberia and the first ever female head of state for an African nation. Although this gathering occurred 75 years ago, the spirit of African leaders of the past can still be found today in movements such as Stand Up to Racism and most notably Black Lives Matter, whose continuous activism has inspired a generation of people to fight for change and equality. Nowhere has this been seen better than in 2020, during the almost year-long worldwide protests against police brutality and structural racism that followed the killing of George Floyd. This large movement for equality and justice spread worldwide with protests in over 60 countries. Despite this, the condemnation from politicians and a largely militarized police force served as a grim reminder that for many the fight against racism is far from over.
Omukazi afunira musweire omusajja afunira omukazi wokonapona mbagamba bali omuliri kitalini bayi iyo baba kazi amugalula kyanye kyagala kyankomera kubavurwa kagenge omwana bayangambira iwowai omwana bayangambira ati woba ntini wali kwetwa mulumu nomukaire ekibindu
Well, thank you. I think this has been, we really enjoyed the premiere. Right, and we've got three of you, save one person, but he'll be in the audience thinking about you, I'm sure. So let's get the questions going. So you focused your attention on three figures, Kwame Nkrumah, Len Johnson, and Amy Ashwood Garvey. Why did you choose them?
I personally chose to focus on Len Johnson because I found him to be a very interesting Pan-Africanist figure, especially when it came to my research. For instance, I really forgot to page stuff on the screen. Len Johnson, it's the pictures I'm showing up, but
There we go.
so Len Johnson himself was a boxer from Manchester in the 1950s. He was at the time there was an ongoing issue called the Colour Bar, which basically banned non-white boxers from participating in royal events such as the Royal Albert Hall. And Johnson was a very well-known Pan-Africanist figure who regularly campaigned alongside the British Communist Party and was a regular campaigner against racism in housing and education in Manchester. And he was particularly a well-known figure at the 5th Pan-African Congress of 1945, And this was why I found him so interesting. As you can see here, this was a picture that was actually included in the film, which was advertising an event that he was organising protesting Daniel Malan's very horrifically racist apartheid regime in South Africa, which he was organising on May Day. And so his activism was very much inspiration behind the research that I put into the script as well. And yeah, so I did find it very interesting to. I'm sorry.
That's a great.
So he was a kind of local lad, so to speak, who was very involved in the struggle.
Yeah, and especially as we talk about the Pan-African Congress, and it had figures from all over the world, but we also thought it was very important to have someone from Manchester as well, especially as the event did take place in Manchester. So it was important to have a figure like Ben Johnson, as you can see here with the 5th Pan-African Congress of 1945, the original advertisement picture. I went to the Working Class Movement Library so I can find pictures and documents of him so we can include them. In here. So for that, I just want to give a very, very big thank you to the Working Class Movement Library. They were so helpful in our research for this. And as you can see, there's him there talking at the event. Ben Johnson was a massive inspirational figure. And like we said, 96 wins out of 135 matches, so he was also a very good boxer. But yes, Ben Johnson was a very interesting figure and a strong campaigner against racism, and his speeches at the 5th Pan-African Congress, his speeches at the event are still very prevalent today, and I just hope his memory isn't forgotten.
Yeah, well, with Kwame Nkrumah, he was like one of the first elected presidents of Ghana, and it showed a real change from like British colonisation to independence. And he was like one of the first people that were able to do that, and I think focusing on him helped show how everything changed that moment and how it was a real step more going forward. Yeah.
We felt, as a team, that we needed to find out exactly who are everyone from the Pan-African Congress, and once we found out there were only 2 women and one was Amy Ashley Garvey, we almost analysed a bit their life stories. And once we found out, even then, like she went to America, she had a newspaper, she was promoting Pan-Africanism through it, just equality and everything around. Then she went to London, she had, she organised a club, she was again pushing it in a different country, Pan-Africanism. She then apparently organised the first session for the Pan-African meeting between all the people, and we felt it for someone at that time to go to America, to go to London, travel a bit around Africa in general, it was very important that we can include someone so driven and so powerful. And it was incredible to read about her journey, and we felt it's important to add that there are strong women, there are driven women, and how powerful women can be. And it was very important, basically, really. And it was quite surprising for me to read. I'm sure for everyone else it was quite surprising as well when we were discussing who to select, and that's pretty much it, really.
Because that's my supplementary question. If we were to do, I guess, a virtual 5th Pan-African Congress now, in today's world, I mean, how do you think the gender situation would play?
I personally think there would be more women, because they just have more powerful voices now. And for my surprising thing for me, for example, is each person that we focus on had their own platform in a way. Like Ben Johnson was a well-known boxer, so that had some weight to it. Amy Ashley Garvey had her own newspaper, so that had a platform she could express herself and push her ideals. So with the current, not social media, part of it, what is good about it is people have their own platforms. But personally, I wish we find more, not in a bad way, but not people who are not only sports athletes, because I found a lot of sports athletes and they push their ideals, but I like to see more people in the governments and people, people of different industries, showing their ideas and like maybe bringing them into the conversation.
That's true, that's a point. Because, I mean, in that way, it was a range of personalities. Yeah. So you have Nkrumah, who becomes the first president of Free Africa, so to speak.
Yeah.
Johnson, if you like, as a sports corner. And then you've got Amy Marcus Garvey.
Yeah, she's almost like a journalist in a way, but also like read editorial in her newspaper.
Over to Jade.
Yes, I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the research process, because we Ola and Kai and I landed this brief on you with Simon, who's also in the audience, Simon Stanton Sharma and Maura Tracy, who kind of steered you through this project. And what that of course required was for you to go away and do a lot of research about something you might never have heard about before. So you've already mentioned the Working Class Movement Library, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about any of the other archives, or a little bit more about the Working Class Movement Library, perhaps, anything that you found particularly interesting or surprising as part of your research.
Well, for my part of the research, I was basically just looking at loads of different people and seeing what we could get from them. So yeah, I had to just watch so many videos and everything. Yeah, and then just try and remember it all. So I had like 2 massive documents of research of like different people we could look into.
I think the hard part is because there's so much about the event and the people around, and was finding a way to condense and tell what's important for these 3 people.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of information, and we do want to keep it short, but also not overflow the information in the film.
I think as well, our research kind of does tie into the script for this video, because like you guys said, we had a lot of people that we researched with this project. We didn't just go to places like the Working Class Movement Library. We also went to the About Roman Library in Manchester Central Library, and to find research, the John F. Kennedy Library online. So there were so many places that we were researching. I also used things like TED Talks as my research as well, found some good sources on Pan-Africanism there. So there was so much more that we wanted to talk about when it came to this event. But again, we were very limited when it came to scripts, because we could only make a 10-minute video. But I think we went through something like 8 drafts of the script. But there was so much more that we wanted to talk about, and because there was way more research than just the Working Class Movement Library, where we were able to get all those pictures of Len Johnson and the original promotional posters for the event. Yeah, there was so... Yeah, I think that's...
They've got some wonderful things in the Working Class Movement Library, haven't they? You showed some great images of the things that you'd found. I don't know if you have a question you want to ask about that.
That segues really well into the next question. So how do you bring these photographs to life? So this is your... how do you do it?
Yeah, that's your specialty there.
That's me, yeah. We got every photo and we put it into Photoshop, and
the gist of it really is we cut around the objects from the background, and we separate the objects as well, and we began animating really what we can and what fits for each image. For example, there's handshakes, we puppeteer the handshakes, we puppeteer some tilting of the heads, we tried adding some smiles to their faces as well. In addition, we also put sound effects, for example, when people were taking photographs of them. On the Gold Coast, there's a picture that they're on a yacht or somewhere on the coast, so we tried to add a bit of the seagulls and a bit of the water moving, and there was a lot, so we had to carefully not overdo it as well, because there was, quite frankly, a lot of photographs, and that was part of really like the process really of it. And Sam and Danny and Adam contributed quite a lot to it, because they were the ones animating it, and then I was looking into it afterwards in the edit, and if something was a bit off or something wasn't working, I had to send it back to them. They sent it back to me, so it was quite a long process, and it could have been quite. It was quite stressful at times, just because there's so much going backwards and forwards.
Yeah, staying up till 12 editing.
Yeah.
Right, so what you see is not exactly what Was there? What was that? But good. I mean, it did come up really well. I mean, it seemed quite seamless to me from like untrained eye. But over to Jade again.
Yeah, I have, I suppose, what I think is one of the most important questions that I can ask you, really, which is to invite you to reflect on your own positions. So you are actually four white filmmakers making a film about Black history and making a film about Pan-Africanism. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about your approach to this and what you learned as part of that process.
Well, it's an area we've not really discussed really. We're a whole new areas focus to look into, and I think it's something that needs to be discussed more. But yeah, definitely.
I think part of our discussion was how do we stay true to the actual source material, and how do we try and empathize with these people and what they were going through at that time, and try and understand where they're coming from, because we all come from different places and they're coming from a nation that's just been colonized and they're trying to find their own way, which is something quite foreign for us really. And it was an important discussion we had to have about not staying true to just trying to take the ideals of the people and the message of the Pan-African Congress to our story, which obviously it's up to you to judge really if we did that or not. But that was mainly the discussion we had and what we tried to aim for. Again, not sure how that's come across, because we've obviously put effort into this project and we've put a lot of different hats for this project, from research to different technical roles and everything like that.
I think as well there was the research was probably the most important part of this, because like you said, we're four white filmmakers making a film on Pan-Africanism and how it ties into modern Black liberation. So I think our research was probably the most important part of this, because so we can know exactly what to talk about, how to talk about it exactly, and to make sure that the right voices are heard as well. And also we also wanted to include other other smaller aspects in there as well. Like for instance, our narrator is a person of colour as well, so we wanted to include him in our project as well, so we could sort of
bring more authenticity to it a bit more. I suppose that's kind of like what we kind of aim for a bit, because we felt that the voice, kind of like the voice leading the narration, was very important, because you can see all these pictures animated and the music will add to it, but the voice really is what will drive the narrative forward.
I think you've made some great points there, because I think, filmmaking, histories, recovering these things and using these creative mediums is designed to build empathy. And, anti-racist work is the work of everyone, isn't it? So I think films like this could be used in, say, for example, in schools. I think that would be a really good way of using it, if you can get it out there.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And also it links back to my question that's going to come next, which is that, I mean, even when the Pan-African Congress, the 5th meeting took place, there were many allies. So although it was mainly a struggle for Black Africans and the diaspora, the allies in Manchester were those who helped have the meeting set up. So, I mean, in some ways you could see yourselves as allies in terms of your being involved in it. But I mean, the question I was going to ask is, it's really interesting to see you kind of view all the material that we gave you on PAC 75. How do you think the lessons, or what lessons do you think you've learned from all of this that we could apply to today? And what have you learnt about it yourself? I mean, they're the obvious ones about some links, but in terms of your own, if you like, journey, how do you feel what you've done has, what lessons have you learned?
I feel like in terms of lessons that I've learned personally from this project, is that because we were trying to tie it, and because obviously in the script we were tying in the events of the 1940s with the 5th Pan-African Congress with the modern day Black Lives Matter movement. And I think one very important lesson to learn there is that the issues of the past are still very much alive today. the issues that many people of colour were facing are still carrying on to this day, even in more countries that are supposed to be more forward-thinking, countries that are trying to that try to market themselves as progressive. People of colour still face a lot of struggles in these countries, and I think that was something that we really wanted to focus on, especially at the end, because the struggle is still very much ongoing, and that's something that can definitely be learned from the research that we did.
I think part of what I wish progresses a lot is we see these people in the Pan-African Congress who have a very strong voice and are very driven. And I like to see different people from higher position give more voices to people of colour, to make their ideals and make their backgrounds and make their even just their opinion more known, because we only see so much, unfortunately. And for me, who only knew very little about the Pan-African Congress, finding about these people and what their journey was, what their lives are, it was very interesting, and I wish there's more of it in the current world.
Yeah, we need to be more open-minded to other people, and not just judging people based on your experiences, but try and understand their experiences as well.
So was it slightly transformational?
It's incredibly important to elevate the voices of black people and people of colour. It's incredibly important to make their voices heard in the world, especially in this day and age. It be in the form of representation or greater voices at rallies, and I think it's very important that their issues are still heard today.
I have one final question for you. And it's really, you're all graduates or nearly graduates of the MA, let me get this right, TV, drama and post-production, aren't you? And I know that Adam Douglas has already gone on to great things. He's got a job at BBC History. But what's next for you as filmmakers and in the future for you three?
Well, personally, is finding something we're quite excited for, and something, whether that's independent projects or projects that are more there's more investment in, finding what's around Manchester, the Northwest, finding companies, what we can offer as individuals, as team members. I think that's quite important, and it's at the end of the day, we just need to get a bit lucky, really, each one of us. And it's not even just in our industry, it's in every industry.
It's a tough time.
It's a tough time, and it's just getting that opportunity for each and every one of us, and just running with it.
Yeah, I'm trying to move to Salford to work in Media City, but it's going to be a difficult journey.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed,
yeah. I'm hoping to find work in the media industry. I've got a job at the moment, but film and media is the ultimate goal for me. Great. Particularly, I would, like Danny, like you said, I would love to work in a place like Media City. I studied there for a year. Simon was my tutor for a year. I would absolutely love to work in a place like Media City. It's a wonderful place, and but yeah, media and film is the ultimate goal for me.
Well, Manchester and Salford are great places to
Absolutely.
work. So thank you so much for answering the questions.
Yeah, I think we can now open it to the audience. Dom?
Yeah.
Go for it. Travelling mic.
Sorry? No. You have to?
Yeah, sorry.
Right. I've been doing research over the years of Manchester's connections with Detroit. I've got this theory about the first jukeboxes that kick-started the regeneration of Manchester, basically coming from the Burton Wood Air Base, and the Black GIs bringing in 45s, but the connection, oh no, if I start talking about the music, I'll just go off on one and never come back. But how Manchester is in debt to black music as the regeneration, where kids could escape the misery of the city and get off the faces and dance, whether it's soul music, jazz, funk, techno and house. And there's a great synergy and great stories between the connections between Manchester and Detroit, and other stories as well about Henry Ford shipped a whole factory over here. But I'm starting to go off on one, aren't I? I'll come back. The question is, and part of the research I've been reading about Grace Lee Boggs. I don't know if anybody knows of her. In Detroit, she's like I was going to say a living saint, but she died fairly recently. And she married Jimmy Boggs, who was a black civil rights campaigner, and they were written some amazing community papers which are really relevant to what's going on today. But they actually met Nakremi and CLR James quite a lot. I think they met him in Italy, they met him in New York, they met him in London, they came to London, they came to Manchester about 3 times, including to the conference. And I mean, there's reference to it here, but I don't know that much about the attendees or who came to the conference. And I just wondered if you ever came across Grace Lee Boggs and Jimmy Boggs, or any reference to any of that, or who might know. Because I know you've been doing lots of research. Is it Farida and other people? I don't.
Marika Sherwood, or Shireen Hirsch.
So I just.
Or hacking, yeah. But there is a list of all the attendees, because I've got the original document. I think I have seen the name Boggs, but you're right. I don't think all the people who attended have had as much intense research. So I'm answering. But you chose certain people, and they've given you the reasons why. But
we did research quite a few people who attended the Congress, but I in my research I personally didn't find. No, I didn't find the Boggs.
I can't on top of my head, but that's also might be because there's so much, and because there's so much, we kind of almost we kind of get lost in each thing, and it's hard to actually remember all the names, if that makes sense. Really sorry, but
no. I've just been trying to find out more about it, whether if I read any.
Yeah, it's also one of the things where.
Know. But I forgot to say thank you very much. It's absolutely great and really lovely film. So thank you. Just quickly getting back, is it all right for?
And then
I think there's another question. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for a great sort of documentary. I'm interested in the Garvey sort of link, because Marcus Garvey is Jamaican, and he formed a few sort of Negro movements, also inspired Malcolm X and also the Nation of Islam. So the Garvey connection is a very, very big connection in terms of Marcus Garvey went to London. He's one of the major sort of leading black spokesmen, legal spokesmen in the 1940s, 1950s in terms of American sort of culture compact with Malcolm X, Nation of Islam. So I know the Marcus Garvey movement is very important in terms of this documentary. Because you did mention the lady who was a Garvey connection who came to London. So my question is about, in terms of doing this particular section on the Garvey connection, I want to know a little bit more about Marcus Garvey in terms of enlightenment, in terms of how much you knew about his connection with Jamaica and his connection with other sort of outskirts in American sort of history, Afro-American sort of history, really.
Marcus Garvey's connection for us was always almost connected to, because we focused on Amy Ashford Garvey. They were almost going in a pair for a while, and because we decided to focus on Amy Ashford Garvey, they kind of diverged a bit.
Yeah.
So, I wish I could tell you more about Marcus Garvey.
He's a very important figure.
Yeah, he's
Marcus
a very
Garvey,
important. Absolutely, it's just
so much influence in the past.
Maybe that's your next film.
Marcus Garvey is an interesting person too, because obviously I was watching a documentary on the 14th Amendment with Will Smith and Samuel Jackson on Netflix. Talk about the 5th Amendment. Obviously, this is about American sort of history. Civil rights, Jim Crow and the Civil War, but in America in the 1930s, 1940s, Marcus Garvey wanted to lead an independent in terms of Afro-Americans own their own businesses, you know what I mean? More about the way they sort of like step out of the white supremacy and trying to conduct a more liberal sort of way of thinking. It sort of like helped to galvanise the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X. It was a big movement in the early 60s, but it's a very powerful contract in terms of bringing this into that sort of like domain, really, because it was a global thing in terms of the colonialism, white supremacy, and the whole world was changing in the 1950s and 1960s. So this sort of like interlined with the civil rights movement, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. There was so much going on, Rosa Parks, you know, so there was so much going on in terms of liberating and also the civil rights in terms of black people around the world, Negro people, not just in America, but in Africa, but in Europe as well. So there was a lot of struggle in terms of how it was connected to worldwide, because America had their problems, so did Britain, so did other sort of concepts, really. So all this sort of like seems to be in terms of what the world was looking at that particular time, and how we were trying to fight for, like, you know, civil rights or equal opportunity, really. And, you know, obviously it's 75 years since the Pan-African sort of movement in 1945. I didn't actually know that it actually started in Manchester, which is very interesting. My parents are from Jamaica, they came here in 1960 with Windrush. So that's another element of our sort of struggle. So there's so many sort of like roots and so many different sort of branches in this particular sort of documentary. So many things can lead into it, really, because it's also about the struggle of how we sort of like realise about not colonisation of each African country. I'm from sort of Jamaica, Caribbean, so that was another part, but also slavery. So there's so much even before 1945. You're looking about slavery.
I think we can develop that further, but definitely Du Bois and some others were also involved in the Pan-African Congress. So it's a wider discussion, but definitely we certainly suggest that you look at the original Pan-African Congress meeting lectures that we had last year as well.
Okay.
But I think there's somebody else behind who wants to answer a question.
Oh, great, we should get your contact to interview you.
Hello, I'm hoping you're going to be able to hear me through a mask. So I just wanted to ask the filmmakers, I'm a historian who looks at sort of representing history on film specifically, so a nice specific question for you. So obviously you're working with photographs and archival materials. I was really interested that you used some footage, news footage, versus what I assume was live footage of the Manchester Black Lives Matter. I was just wondering if you could just sort of comment on how you created that sense of like a living history when you don't have sort of original footage to work with. So how you use I enjoyed sort of the animation of the photographs, but how you use sort of live footage alongside the photographs in terms of that form of storytelling.
I think the mixture of the live footage mixed together with the, how did you describe it, the puppets motion?
The puppets.
I think the mixture of the live footage with the puppet animation would likely be done to represent a constant motion in the film. So, and because sorry. Because we wouldn't be switching between live footage and then just a still image of a picture, so I think it was a good idea to keep including constant motion in the film. So I think it was a.
I think, like he said, we had multiple movement from each photograph, and obviously with the Black Lives Matter footage, we had more of that. But in retrospect, Sam and Adam, they created the story, so the story kind of dictated a bit what we included, and it was just very, I mean, if it worked for you, the way it was done, it kind of all came together in the script, and it worked great for us because everything, the way the story led to the end with the actual footage, we just felt like it was important to show how relevant the Pan-African Congress still is, really, with the movements and what's happening in society at the moment. And it was just a bit of weird fortune in a way that everything just clicked together really.
Thank you.
One last question.
How long did you take to make this film? Just remind us. It was a short while, wasn't it?
About 8-9 weeks.
I'd say 3-4 months, give or take.
From research to
final product, yeah.
Yeah, because the module itself was, I think, 4 months. It was
Yeah.
from end of January to the end of May, and we were given the brief. I think it was the middle of March.
That's
And I think it was around 8-9 weeks. So we immediately went to work with our research. I tried to get in contact with the Working Class Movement Library, and then
Great, sorry, Mum.
I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned earlier that there was a lot, because I mean, we can see that from the film, there's a lot to it, and this is a 10-minute film. If there was like one more person you could have included, or one more sort of area of it, what would it have been? Like if you had, 14 minutes or
Well, who did you consult?
I think there was Thompson Karen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He were another one like Garvey who like rose to power from himself, and then we're able to get independence from, I think it was Sierra Leone, I can't remember. Something like that, yeah.
he was the president.
That's it.
Yeah. But I think he was more contemporary, wasn't he? That's the issue.
Yeah. Because I don't think Sankara actually attended the Congress. We will also talk about other Pan-African figures, such as, obviously, particularly we wanted to talk about South Africa as well, because they were recovering from the apartheid regime in the 90s. So also we wanted to talk about figures like Nelson Mandela and Cyril Ramaphosa. We wanted to talk about those two.
Kind of bring it more up to date.
Yeah, so we can tie it more
Because
into
you
modern
had
day.
Peter Abrahams there, who was the writer.
I'm a little disappointed that Peter Abrahams didn't make the cut.
Got
'cause,
chopped.
I study South African literature, so that would, for me, would have been a great person to include. But
Abigail, you had a question.
Yes, I mean, you were making this film during COVID. How did it impact you, and did it actually facilitate or slow down what you were doing?
I think. Sorry, what you can.
Oh, I'm sorry. Shall I ask that again?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just saying that you were making this during COVID. So how did that impact on the production process? And did it slow you down? Did it facilitate things being remote at all, or did it extend the whole process?
I think because it was animation heavy, we could work remotely quite a lot. I think the only obviously the beginning of the film, which is around Manchester, that needed to be filmed, so that was a bit trickier to get access to. I think you had to go to the Working Class Movement Library, you had to take pictures of Grant Johnson. That was quite a long process to get access to, arrange a date. I think that was the only really hard part to it. But once we had the photographs and the script ready, we were just ready to roll because we just worked on computers really with softwares. So I think it probably could have helped if it wasn't in a COVID environment, because we could have just all went into the same place and worked on the same, just be around each other more and communicating more, because of COVID. For example, Danny might be working on something, but he's sending it to Adam, who's our director, and then Adam's giving me something, and it's just a bit more difficult because we're sending emails or sending uploading files. Whether if we were just inside a big computer room, for example, or a few computer rooms that were next to each other, we could just walk, say something, go back, and it wasn't slowed down as it could have been really.
I know you mentioned remoteness. Pretty much all of our meetings were remote. They were all online through Microsoft Teams, and And even when I wanted to do some research at the Working Class Movement Library, COVID definitely had an impact on that, because they could only allow certain numbers of people in the library at a time. So I was regularly emailing and getting into contact with the head librarian there about which dates I could go into the library. So I was regularly being pushed back when it came to dates because they could only allow a certain number of people in there at a time. So COVID, I would say, definitely did have an impact on the process of this film, but I would say it wasn't too bad of an impact because, well, we actually managed to make it.
Yeah,
we did.
Do we have time for one last question? Any last questions? Okay, Dom, we get to do it again.
No, somebody else will ask. It's about.
Wait for the mic.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's about Len Johnson. I'm more and more fascinated about him, and maybe Ola can explain. There's an event on at the
Tap House.
the Tap House, which I think is, I don't quite know about, and I'd love to know more about him. How he came to Manchester, or even we know where he lived, and if there's any legacy about the boxing, because boxing, especially Moss Side, there's been a lot of community boxing things that have been really important to the area, people coming together, but also the idea of the colour bar, because even when the black GIs came to Manchester, there was riots in Piccadilly where Mancunians, the white American GIs wanted the black GIs to drink in one pub and they were in another pub, even though the stupid thing is that we were kind of fighting fascism. So they were getting the black GIs to fight fascism, but they were kind of instigating fascism in Manchester. But a lot of the Mancunians, there was actually riots and fights with the white GIs who were opposing the Manchester Mancunians opposing the white GIs to support the fact that the colours should be, the black people should be in the bar. So I don't know the thing about the what's happening at the Abbey Tap House, but I'm going to pass this over to Ola, who might be able to tell us. I don't know. The other thing is Raz T. McCannon. Was he part of? He was a Mancunian. Well, not Mancunian, but he was living in Manchester, wasn't he? But he was living in Manchester, who was part of the Pan-African Conference.
Yeah. Well, we've just done a podcast before then, which was all about why Manchester, and it does seem as though there was a large black community who were not just students; they were actually entrepreneurs in their own right. So Raz T. McCannon comes up. Peter Millard, who was actually a doctor. So there were kind of, if you like, middle class to, I guess, even upper middle class black communities who were settled in Manchester. And it seems to have been, as it is today, a place where those who were entrepreneurial, didn't matter what their colour was, were able to thrive and flourish. So.
And Grace Lee Boggs met R.S.T. McCannon. But if there was somebody who may have been missed out in it, I was thinking that he would be quite a good person as a kind of an adopted Mancunian. But anyway, I don't know what to do with this.
Actually, I think I should hand over to Kai, because you're talking about events that are happening next.
Yeah. Oh, right.
I think before we do that, can we please clap?
Thank you so much, and thank you for being so open to quite difficult questions as well, and to be put on the spot, so well done for that. And now I'll just hand this over to Becky Swain, who's the director of Manchester Poetry Library, and she'll tell us about the exciting events coming up.
It really is just to finish to say thank you again to Ola and Jade, who says anti-racist work is the work of everyone. Yeah. Just to say it's very much on our minds here at the Poetry Library and developing an inclusive collection with the community. And you mentioned some of the Mancunians who came to the Pan-African Congress. Just to say that on the 21st, 22nd and 23rd of October, there's a city festival, Corridor of Light, along Oxford Road. And as part of that festival, it falls on the same day as the Pan-African Congress again. And we'll be lighting up the building again, and we're showing both this film. So if anybody you know wants to come back, from 6 till 9, it'll be rolling on a loop. And then in our main theatre, we're showing Voices of Freedom, which was actually put together with residents whose grandparents came to the Pan-African Congress, with some W.E.B. Du Bois and a Marcus. One of the young poets in Manchester chose a Marcus Garvey speech to recite part of in that film. So come and join us for that. And just again, to thank you for sharing the film with us.
And because we filmed the event, if you know anybody interested in this history, do direct them to the film, or to come to those events. And you can find us, so there's a little bookmark as you go out. If you take a green bookmark, you can get in touch and find out about the library.
So can I just mention that the Abbey Tap House, it's this Friday, I think, at 6 o'clock, and they're putting a plaque to commemorate Len Johnson.
That's right.
I'm not, it's about banning the colour bar in pubs, I think. I don't
That's
quite
correct.
Yeah.
It was the first pub to, well, he went into the pub and he was able to challenge the colour bar because he was actually asked to leave the pub.
And he doesn't even drink, so it wasn't even about drinking.
But he brought the mayor of Manchester and everybody into the discussion, and at the end of it, that was the first pub to desegregate drinking.
So that's this Friday.
Still a good pub.
Yeah, it's a fantastic pub. So tonight we won't be going to that pub, but we invite you, if you're keen to carry on the conversations and to interrogate the filmmakers further, go to The Grove, which is our cafe slash bar slash restaurant just next door that way.
Just go out the front door, straight
so,
along, it's on your right hand side after the lift.
Yeah, and so thank you everyone and have a lovely evening. Thank you.